Welcome to the Bowden Blitz. Today we have a special guest. Mason Young from the Tulsa World is here to talk about the new young defensive coordinator at Oklahoma. We're talking about Zac Alley, and I'm so glad to have you on our show with us, Mason.
Yeah, Coach, thanks so much for having me on and being willing to kind of answer my questions about Zach. It's we haven't gotten to talk to him yet here at OU, but a lot of fans, OU fans, really interested to find out, what he's like and what it's going to be like having him as the defensive coordinator for Brent Venable's squad this season. So let's get into it and just tell me a little bit about how you discovered Zach and what that vetting process was like.
Well, let me say this. I think you got a great one, a great young one that's going to be everything you want. Because really, I think if you're an Oklahoma fan, what you want is a Brent Venables defense. And what you got is a young coach, Zac Alley, who knows one defense. And I think that's the Brent Venable defense. And that's what I was looking for. You see, before I got to ULM, I was a analyst at Clemson. And I would do a lot of crossover work. I was an offensive analyst, but I would do a lot of crossover work for Brent on his defense. And so in my second year there, and I got some feelers out for me to be a head football coach. And so I was looking for a young coach that could coach like Brent, have a defense like Brent Venables, because I thought he had the best defense in the country and did great things. And so I was asking, who can do his? Who's young? Who can I afford at ULM? Who can I get on the front end of their career that bring to ULM? And everybody kept saying Zac Alley, Zac Alley. Zac had been with Brent 8 years. So 4 years as a student. He was a student assistant with Coach Venables. He was a GA for 2 years. He was an analyst for 2 years. And then I got him, I think he was an assistant at Boise State 1 year or something like that, someplace like that. And so I got him at a time in which I could afford him. And when he was trying to prove himself as a coordinator, and I guarantee it, and what I got at ULM was a defense that was exactly what Brent was running at Clemson. And that's the kind of guy that he is.
So, what was that first conversation with Zach like? Did you just kind of walk away blown
Yeah.
away and just kind of knowing like, okay, this is going to be my guy?
Yeah. Well, I had to kind of build him up because one, I wanted somebody that was smart. Zach is very smart and he's very confident in himself and he's very competitive. Those are the three keys, I think, to anybody in coaching, no matter what position you hire. And I think I was able to lay out to him, you need to be a defensive coordinator. You're a coordinator. And I think he enjoyed the opportunity to be a coordinator. And that was a chance for him to show what he could do. I became a head coach in college when I was 26 years old, and I had to prove it. But I think that was what Zach wanted to do. And so I brought him here to ULM, a team that had not won a game the year before, had not led in a game. And we went out and won 4 games in his first year there. He ran my defense. And again, I'm a lot like you might say Rich Rodriguez or my father. I'm an offensive coach. I've got to have one key coach that I've got to hire, and that's a defensive coordinator. And I need somebody that knows what they're doing because I'm going to fool with the offense. And that's what Zach brought to me, a confident, a competitive, intelligent young man that was excited about defense and understood the Brent Venables way.
So, what was the first moment where you realized like, okay, we got something here? Whether it was, something in a game that he directly influenced the outcome, something that you saw in practice or in a meeting room, like what was that like
Well,
bombshell moment for you?
yeah. Well, I mean, I've been a head coach 28 years, and I've been at every level. I've been a head coach at Auburn. We've been undefeated, National Coach of the Year. I've been at Division III, Division II, one AA, Group of Five, Power Five. But I'm always going to practice. I'm watching how they run their practice, their defensive side of the ball. How they organize it, how they manage it, the demeanor that they have, the respect they get from their players. And here's a young Zac Alley. I think he's still in his 20s. I think as I've hired him, but he controls that side of the ball. He's got such confidence and so much knowledge of what he's doing. And again, as I watched him out there, I said, this is exactly what Coach Venable does because I like so much the way Coach Venables would utilize blitzing different people, different games, changing for each individual team he was playing against. And Zach was able to do the same things. And again, I didn't want a bunch of different defensive styles or schemes. I wanted the Brent Venable style. And I think if Oklahoma and I think Brent Venables would say, I can't speak for Coach Venables, but I say he doesn't need somebody else's defense. He doesn't need some newfangled. He needs his defense implemented there. And I think that's exactly what you're going to get with Zac Alley because that's where he was trained to put a defensive in.
So in that regard, when
Mm.
you look at the defenses that he ran for you, what sticks out most in terms of the similarities to Brent Venables' defense? And are there any like divergences in terms of like Zach's own adaptations that he's added to it, played off of it?
Yeah. Well, now I'll say this: he probably has added as he goes along on his own. But there's a point in time early when you've got a head coach like Coach Venables. You see, I came from Bobby Bowden. My father was my mentor. He taught me how to coach, and for the first 10 years of my career, I tried to emulate Bobby Bowden, his play calling, how he called things. Some of you older Oklahoma fans might remember 79 and 80 when we played Oklahoma at Florida State in the Orange Bowl, and I was a graduate assistant there, and my dad called plays. But very early in my career, I gained success by imitating, by being able to call his offenses, and that's what I think Zach is still doing. Is he's able to call a Brent Venable defense. I think one of the biggest things is they take game to game. Pressure will come from a lot of different ways, from a lot of different people. It's never the same. It's always looking at a weakness of an offense and coming at you. And I'm talking about a very aggressive defense too, smart defense. If you know Coach Venables, he was smart coach and he had smart children. His kids that played for him were bright. They have a great football IQ. And that's what Zach has, a great football IQ. And so I think the biggest thing that I saw, he ran his defense like his mentor ran a defense. And who's his mentor? It's now his head coach, Brent Venables.
Right. And one of the things, the stats that comes up when you look at the impact that Zach had on your team specifically is how much better you guys were in rushing defense after he got there to compared beforehand. What is it about the way that him and Venables, that defense, the way that they scheme against the run that makes them so successful? Because that's going to be really important this season going into the SEC.
I think without a doubt, because I coached 6 years as a head coach in the SEC, and it's a league where you better stop the run, especially if you're going to beat the top teams in the conference. I mean, not just Texas, who Oklahoma's got a great history with. Wait till you line up against Georgia and Alabama and Florida and a lot of the schools there. If you don't stop the run, you're not going to ever win the game. And so that's what you've got to do. Now we do have teams like Tennessee and other teams that, I mean, passing is their thing. But mostly you've got to be able to stop the run. And I think what I was impressed about Zach, and again, when I say Zach, I'm also saying the things that I saw in Coach Venables is that they're going to have some unblocked defenders there. They may not load the box, but they're going to have people that are run first conscience, and they're going to be able to put people in the box to make tackles. Because usually about 70% of the time in a play, you get tackled by an unblocked defender. You get somebody in the box that you don't have anybody to block, or a blitzer or a penetrator that is not in a position who are ready for it. I think that's the most important thing. It's a smart defensive scheme that makes sure that they allow someone in there that you can't put a hat on. And when you can't put a hat on, they're gonna make plays. And so I think the key is first, I don't care if you're playing passing teams, you got to stop the run. You've got to, because if you eventually they've got to run the football, and then you put them in passing situations that they don't want to be in. You know, if you can stop the run, they're not throwing on 2nd and 2, they're throwing on 2nd and 9, and that's kind of means you're stopping the run there. So I think that goes back to what Zac Alley learned from Brent Venables, in that you better stop the run. And I know it was the same way at Clemson when I was there with them at Clemson, and they did a great job there.
So in keeping with the idea of Zac Alley running, really a carbon copy of Brent Venables' defense, a lot of people have said the mannerisms, the dialect are kind of the same. Did you kind of pick up on that right away and see that kind of continue?
Yeah, I mean, again, you think about it. Here's Zac Alley coming out of high school, going to Clemson, and for 4 years as a student assistant, he's just in awe that he's working with Brent Venables. And then he's a GA, and then he's an analyst. And almost his vernacular, all of his, the way he expresses himself, the way he teaches, the way he yells at players, all those things is Brent Venables. The only thing I haven't seen him quite as much, when Brent was a coordinator, you couldn't keep him off the field. They had a coach at Akron. I guess they do. I mean, at Clemson, maybe they do at Oklahoma now. They just had to grab his shirt and keep him on the sideline. And you'll have to do that with Zach a little bit too, because he will be animated and he will be vocal and he'll be in his players' ears. And so you'll see that a lot. I think you'll see that from Zac, that you saw for those of you who watched Coach Venables when he was a defense coordinator at Clemson and the things that he did.
Yeah, for the record, Coach Venables has maintained since getting to Oklahoma that he doesn't need a get back coach anymore. And obviously Adam Smotherman went with Tony Elliott over to Virginia, so he couldn't have him. But uh yeah, what the one thing that we keep hearing from OU players that we've talked to throughout the spring and now going into fall camp is just the way that Zac Alley takes a very complex thing in Brent Venables' defense and makes it simple for them to understand. Did you get a sense that he was really good at that when you had him?
Yeah, and I think that goes to his he's an intelligent. He's very smart. And a smart coach will use the old KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And I think you've got to do that. Players, you don't want a player to know everything you know. You want them to know what they can learn and what they can apply on the football field. And I think he learned that by Coach Venables. And most all your outstanding coaches understand that you can't be so complex that the players can't just relax and play football. You've got to let a great player play ball. And you can't do that with a lot of thinking going on out there. Now, you've got to have you got to have smart football players. I mean, they've got to understand the concept behind what you're doing and why you're doing it. And they'll play better by doing that. But I think that goes back to the fact I said, not only is he a competitive coach and he's strong believing in himself, he also is an intelligent coach. I think that goes back to doing that. And that's one of the things about him that's so good.
Can you put into perspective why you need a person like that that's relatable to the players? Like how complex is that Venables defense to try and understand and try to teach to an 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old athlete?
I think it's probably more complex than the players have to buy in, have to know. I mean, every player has to know what he does, and he has to know what he does in relation to the guy next to him. But conceptually, he doesn't really have to understand the theory behind this and the theory behind that quite as much. So again, one of the keys to coaching defense, and again, I'm speaking for myself now and not for Coach Venables, is that a coach knows what to relate to the players and what those players need to carry on to the field. Because basically, they've still got to be able to line up in the proper position, carry out their proper assignment, and then tackle and cover and do the things in football that you need to do. And I think that's so important.
So, new wrinkle in college football this year, the helmet communication with the walkie-talkies and the guys having mics in their helmets is going to be something that the teams are going to have as a tool this year. Seems like Zac's the kind of communicator and the guy that you would want to have in your Mike linebacker's ear right before the play, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, it'll be right up his right up his alley, no pun intended. But I retired this year. I hate that I won't be able to go through the helmet rule now that having the helmet. But that it's going to be one helmet on offense, one on defense, one on the field, and you can have 4 helmets. You can have 4 different people, I believe, that can have the radio in their helmet, only one on the field. But I can imagine how much fun that would have been, especially a defensive coordinator, because you got to remember, a smart defensive coordinator is also a great self-scout. He studies the other team. He knows their tendencies. He knows what they do in situations within the game. And I know from being at Clemson with Coach Venables, he is huge on studying the tendencies of the other team. So before the ball is ever snapped, he has a good idea of what they might do. When you can be in the helmet of your captain or your leader on defense up until 15 seconds, I think before the clock runs out, you can do a lot of things to get them in the right position, right formation. Again, haven't had the luxury of doing that. I lost that ability, didn't get a chance to go with that rule, but that's going to be right up Zac Alley's alley. I will say this, Coach, you know how it is where offense and defensive players can wear the same jerseys. Then you put them on special teams, and there's a whole bunch of mess. Now you've got guys, up to 4 different guys with green dots on their helmet. I think they're going to use the green dot, and you got to make sure those 2 guys aren't in at the same time, or because it's a penalty. Because I've had some terrible situations where 2 guys, somebody gets hurt, and all of a sudden you got 2 guys on a special team in the same jersey number, and you don't catch it till the play begins. So I think it's going to be it's a valuable tool for all coaches. Don't think it's going to eliminate signal stealing. I don't think it's going to eliminate still having to signal to your receivers on offense, and maybe your linebacker are still got to be able to coordinate with the cornerbacks and the safeties. So I don't know how all that's going to work out, but I know good and well, having been a head coach for 25 years, I've been a play caller on offense for 20, that being able to communicate with somebody on the field up until 15 seconds left till the play call is over can only make it more valuable to the offense or to the defense. And with someone like Zac, that means he's going to be on the cutting edge of it as he comes in. So I think it's a lot easier for that than an old guy like me that's been doing it forever without that, and then having to learn how to do it. So again, that'll be something. And I want to say something else, and I don't know if you'll ask this question, but I think your fans will want to know that it's very important to me when you look at Zac Alley that he's basically been vetted by 4 different Power 5 coaches or Power 4 coaches. In other words, he's been the first choice of coaches that have recognized his talent. Goes back to when Coach Venables made him his young protege, his young coach that spent time with him. And then when I was looking for a coach, everybody there said, this is the guy you want to hire. If you can get him, this is the guy you can have it at ULM, at the University of Louisiana Monroe. And then when Rich Rodriguez, who was a national coach of the year at West Virginia, went to Michigan, went to Arizona, when he leaves me and goes to Jacksonville State, he's got a lot more money than I've got. So who does he hire? He hires my defense coordinator, Zac Alley. He could have hired anybody from any team around, any of his former coaches. He goes out there as a very experienced, veteran, successful head coach, and he hires Zac Alley. And then after those 2 successful stints, Brent Venables comes back needing a defensive coordinator, and he knows what he's doing, and he hires Zac Alley. So the biggest, I think, the plus, and say, well, what kind of guy do we got? Well, you got a guy that 3 head coaches who know what they're doing all chose him first. And I think that's an important part of what you get when you get Zac Alley.
Well, and you being at the head of kind of that chain of the coaches that vetting him, like what gave you, I mean, obviously very, very successful as a special teams coordinator at Boise State and coached linebackers there as well. What gave you the confidence that, he was ready for that opportunity to be a defensive coordinator? And if I had to guess, I'm guessing it goes back to just the knowledge of Venable's system and knowing that that's what you wanted. But
Yeah.
What else were maybe some of the factors that played into your confidence that, all right, this is the guy that I can take and run with?
Well, I think if we got on the phone or when he sat in front of me and got on the board or he talked to me about philosophy, he's got to sell himself. It wasn't Brent Venables at that point. It was what was his demeanor? What was his personality? What does he bring in his character to the table, in his personality, in his intelligence? And I think that's all those things that I had to see. I knew the scheme that I wanted, and I know I wanted somebody that was taught by Coach Beno because I just left at Clemson, so I wanted that style of defense. But it wasn't until I talked to him on the phone, and I think you'll see it on the sideline with Zac. You'll see that confidence. You'll see him as a guy in charge. He kind of has that look, that square jaw and that unshaven little young. He's got that young defensive coordinator that's going somewhere big kind of look, and that's kind of the way Zac is. But I think it's the air and the way in which he carries himself. Not only is that going to make an impression on the fans that watch him and the Oklahoma fans that watch him, it makes an impression on the players. I coached a lot of years against Steve Spurrier at Florida. He was one of my big competitors I worked against. And he called himself the old ball coach. And really, I always felt that players played so well because they thought he had the best play. He could call the best plays in America. He was, and so they didn't have the best offense because he called the best plays. If they had the best offense because they thought he called the best plays because he had such confidence in himself. And I see young coaches that have that type of confidence in themselves and carry themselves like that. And you just know they're destined to go far. And I mean, 3 or 4 years ago, I don't think anybody heard of Zac Alley other than people at Clemson and maybe ULM, but they've heard of him now, and I think he's going to be a big impact because you're going into the SEC. I'm going to tell you, it's a monster, and I've spent much of my years coaching in the SEC, and of course, I've coached against Oklahoma 79-80 when I was a graduate assistant at Florida State. I coached against them when I was at Akron making a lot of money, but Mayfield and company beat the heck out of us, and so I played at West Virginia in 78. I coached against Oklahoma. So I know the tradition of Oklahoma, and I know how important football is to Oklahoma. I think the uniforms you're going to wear for Bud Wilkinson and the great crowd, the uniforms that you're going to wear this year, to me, a guy my age that has been a part of football so long, that means a lot to me. But I think Zac Alley is the right guy at the right time and as a keeper. And I think that's going to be important for Brent to be able to run the show at Oklahoma, knowing that the guy that's running that defense is going to do it exactly like he would do it. He may not say that. He may say this guy's going to do it on his own, but I believe that Zac Alley will do it exactly like Brent Venables is going to do it.
So, Coach, you talk about kind of in the idea that, and this is kind of the working theory around Oklahoma too, is that it's just going to make it that much easier for Brent Venables to have someone that he knows and trusts, helping run his defense. And we've already seen in practice, Coach V not spending as much time with the linebackers, really letting Zac and the assistants that he's got, take it over and do their thing. So how did he make it? How did Zac make it easier for you as a head coach when he was at ULM? Because I'm sure he probably did.
Well, the fact that he can run the show, the fact that he can take the defensive side of the ball. Now, you got me, an offensive background head coach who wants to stand behind the offense every day and help call plays and get in under their skin. And I depend on the defensive coordinator to go out there and be able to handle it. Zac can do that. Now, Coach Venables is just the opposite. Like Coach Saban, he is a defensive coach that is a head coach, and that's going to be he'll probably be standing over it a little bit, but I think he's going to be so assured and so comfortable with what's being taught and the way it's being taught, because he's going to look at Coach Alley and he's going to see it being done the way he did it, because that's what Zac Alley learned. He learned to do it like he did it. And so I think that's going to be very comforting to him, because I think deep down what all of Oklahoma wants, and I can't speak for Coach Bill, they want a defense that plays like Venables' defense that he had at Clemson. That's what he had so good when they won 2 national championships. And that's what Oklahoma's had when they have great football teams. They're great on both sides of the ball. And so I think that's going to be very reassuring that the head coach doesn't have to go back and run the defense, but he can feel comfortable that the defense is being run like he would want it run.
Gotcha. We talked about previously the whole new helmet comp system coming in this season. Another asset that teams are going to have from a technology standpoint is those iPads. And, maybe Zac Alley is a guy that uses that. But at the same time, like when I hear people talk about him, these stories keep coming up of he just has this crazy memory of he can recall a play that Clemson ran when he was a GA or student assistant, and then he can, take it and reprise it in a game several years down the line. Or, if there's some sort of he'll be watching a game back, and if there's some sort of bust, he'll be sitting around on the couch or something, and he can tell whoever he's with, okay, we did this wrong and this happened and all that stuff. Did you in meetings, did you get a lot of those perceptions of what he could do in that regard, of how good his memory was? And is that rare? Is that rare, or is it something that separates good coach, great coach?
Well, I think there's a couple of thoughts out there. One, I mean, anytime whether you're learning how to something for a test in school or you're learning how to prepare for a team, the more I can watch a video of an opponent and do a scouting report on the opponent, and then I can remember on the field, I can remember exactly what they do in that exact situation. The more of those things I can remember, and then what I did to stop it. Now, I will say this: when I was a young coach, my history wasn't that far back. And so there was only so many examples of things I had been through myself. And every year as I got older and older, the body of work became bigger and my memory went back further. And there were lots of times I was in a 4th and 1 or a 3rd and 1. And so Zac has a great, he's got that smart ability to remember things that he's learned, but he's only going to get better and better because, again, he's a young coach, and as he develops as a coach, his memory is going to be more and more. As you play Texas over and over again, you're going to have a good memory of what happened to you during that circumstance and what you did to stop something. So I think he's got all the ability in the world, but some of those things only come through experience. Now, and again, that's where Coach Venables is going to be a part of this thing too, because Coach Venables has been been a defense coordinator a long time. I'm sure he'll be on that headset. He'll be on the headset with the defensive coordinator, with the offensive coordinator, and when he wants to have input, I think it'll be a smooth chain, a smooth communication between the head coach and the defensive coordinator when they talk the same language, when they've talked the same language for years. And I think you're going to see a smooth operation there in regard to making sure, because I've always felt like when I had an opposite coordinator, I was calling plays, I wanted to make sure the opposite coordinator did the same thing I wanted to do. And the quarterback did the same thing that we wanted to do. And the communication lines were there. And I think with Zac, that'll be the case with him.
And I'm sure a big piece of that is probably everything that I hear about him is just the guy's a film junkie and knows no hours. What's that dirty work in the dark story for you? Did you catch him up at the building watching film at 3 a.m. on a Sunday or something? Like what memories stick out to you in that regard?
Now you got he left before I got there, so he was already moved on. The fact that the semester I got to Clemson, he had just moved on, and all I knew of was of the stories of him.
I meant Zac, not Coach V.
Oh, Coach V.
Yeah.
Oh, gee, many Christmas. I've been around a lot. Now I've been around some great defensive coordinators back in the 90s when I was at Auburn. I had Bill Brother Oliver was probably the top defensive coordinator in the country at that time. 4 o'clock in the morning, they're in the office working, So Zac Coach V has the hours. He puts incredible hours in. He's very detailed. Go over every possible thing you can go over. It was funny, as an analyst, I spent 2 years trying to think I could see if I could give him something that the other young analyst couldn't give him, because he wanted to know every detail about everybody. If their right hand was down this way, if their left elbow was sitting on their hip, however the offensive lineman's stance was, all those things. And I think Zac is going to be the same way, because Coach Venables, it was every detail. And you understand how the best guys in the country, they don't just get there by luck. They get there by hard, good smarts, good intelligence, all those things. But you get there by hard work. And I think Coach Venables is a hard work guy. He's a grinder, and anybody that worked for him like Zac is going to be a grinder.
But so did you get that? Did you get that kind of same thing from Zac at ULM?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Anytime somebody could get to the office earlier than me, I would have to give them real plus. And quite often Zac would make it into the office before I got there, and I'm an early guy too, and so that always impresses me that they walk the walk and don't just talk the talk.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think of Zac the recruiter? How much did you guys get to do visits or host recruits together, and what stood out to you in terms of just his personability and interaction with athletes and their families?
Well, again, Zac he's a hard worker. I mean, recruiting is a lot of hard work. You've got to be willing to get on the phone. You've got to be able to talk continually with your recruits. You've got to be there for them. You've got to go the extra mile. You've got to spend the extra time. You've got to send the notes. Do all the little things. And again, that would just fit along with what Zac does. I don't think you can be, back when I first got into coaching in the 80s, a long time, 40 years ago, you had some coaches that were great ball coaches on the field, and some coaches were great salesmen, great recruiters, and you just hoped you had half one, half the other. But a guy like nowadays, you've got to be able to do both. And I think Zac puts the same effort and energy into his recruiting that he does into his coaching.
So, and this would be my last question,
Okay.
but you alluded to it, I think earlier. It was really interesting. There was an off-season list that ESPN put out that was the top 30 coaches in college football right now that are going to define the next decade of college football. And Zac was on that list. Is this a guy that we're looking at, that we're going to look, a few years down the road and be like, okay, this is now, as you were talking about, at points in time he had been unheard of, but now this is a guy that is we're going to see in 10 years down the road, okay, he's going to be the best defensive coordinator in college football, or maybe even a head coach. You feel like that's kind of the ceiling and the opportunity in front of him?
Yeah, I think he has all the capabilities to be a head football coach. I don't want to push that too far. He's at a great place. You can be an assistant coach, a coordinator at Oklahoma a long time and not hurt your career one bit. And let me say this. Usually if you're a coordinator at a place like Oklahoma, you're either going nowhere or you're going up fast. You got to get the job done. But I don't know that at his age and he's young that he has to go jump and jump. You know, my dad was a college head football coach, and I couldn't wait to be a college head football coach. And so at 26, I got a little bitty school and started there and worked my way up. I think right now, if I'd have been a coordinator at an Oklahoma at a young age, I might say, you know what, I'm gonna work on my talents there. So I think he has a lot of the characteristics, but I don't want to put the cart before the horse before the cart or the cart before the horse. I want to say, okay, now you're at Oklahoma. All right, Zach, and I think I, like a lot of other people, think you're the perfect guy for the choice and you're going to do a great job. Now go do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, Coach, thanks so much for the insight and thanks so much for having me on here.
Thank you, Mason. Appreciate it.